No Nanny lasted 48 hours with Vampire King Wild triplets, until Broke's single mom made them breakfast. The wind howled through the twisted branches of the forest, carrying whispers that seemed almost human. Fog clung to the ground like a living thing, curling around the gnarled roots of ancient trees. At the heart of the forest, hidden from the eyes of ordinary travelers, stood a castle. Dark stone towers pierced the sky, and the windows glowed faintly with a pale, unnatural light. This was the home of the Vampire King, a place of mystery, fear, and power. Yet today, it would have a visitor who had no fear of legends or ghost stories, because she had more pressing matters to face. Clara had been running from one impossible job to another. A single mother with a child to feed and rent to pay, she had no room for doubt. When the posting appeared online, she almost laughed. No nanny lasts more than 48 hours with the Vampire King's wild triplets, it said. But desperation has a way of swallowing laughter, and with a deep breath, she tightened her coat around her shoulders and walked toward the looming castle. The gates groaned open at her approach, as if the castle itself were observing her. Clara stepped inside, her heart beating fast, not from fear, but from the strange excitement of stepping into a world so unlike her own. A tall figure appeared in the grand hall. He moved with the grace of a predator, yet his presence commanded attention beyond mere height or strength. His hair was black as midnight, and his eyes glimmered with a dangerous brilliance. Clara could feel the weight of his gaze before she even realized he was staring at her. "I am the king," he said, his voice smooth, deep, and without warmth. "You are the nanny." Clara swallowed hard but held her head high. "Yes, your majesty," she replied, forcing calm into her voice. She had faced angry landlords, impatient bosses, and unreasonable clients, but something about him was different. Not cruel exactly, but absolute. He studied her for a long moment and then turned, gliding ahead without a word, leading her deeper into the castle. The hallways were long, lined with ancient portraits whose eyes seemed to follow her, and candles flickered, casting shadows that danced along the walls. Clara's stomach tightened. She had entered a new world, a world of beauty, danger, and secrets that would not be revealed lightly. At the center of the castle, chaos reigned. 3 children ran in circles, shrieking with laughter, throwing cushions, knocking over vases, and apparently testing every law of gravity and patience. Their hair shone like black silk, and their eyes gleamed with mischief. They were the triplets, notorious across the land for being impossible to tame. Clara swallowed again. She could do this. She had to do this. "Stay," she shouted, her voice echoing off the stone walls. The children froze for a moment, startled, and then erupted into even louder laughter. The eldest, a boy with a shock of unruly hair, darted toward her with a cushion raised. Clara caught it midair, surprising even herself. The king's gaze softened barely. A flicker of amusement, or maybe disbelief, passed over his sharp features. He did not intervene. He never did. Those who tried to control his children quickly learned that he allowed chaos to rule as much as he did. "You will learn quickly," he said, almost to himself, and left the room with silent footsteps that seemed to devour sound. Clara took a deep breath. She could feel the tension crackling between herself and the triplets. This would not be easy, but she had learned long ago that courage, patience, and a little creativity could work wonders with children. Breakfast became her first tool. She had no magic, no mysterious powers, just simple food and an understanding of human nature. She led the triplets to the dining hall, where the long, dark table gleamed under candlelight. Pancakes, warm and golden, were placed in front of them. For a moment the castle was silent. The children hesitated, their wild eyes sizing her up. Then one by one they reached for the pancakes. The sound of laughter returned, but this time it was softer, curious, not rebellious. Clara smiled. A small victory, but in this castle every small victory mattered. Night fell and the castle took on a more menacing character. Shadows stretched across the halls, and the wind whispered through the towers like voices of the past. Clara prepared the bedrooms for the triplets, tucking them in and reading stories by candlelight. The children, for the first time since she arrived, listened. She felt the weight of centuries in the castle walls, but also a strange warmth. She was beginning to feel at home in a place that should have terrified her. Then came the footsteps, heavy, silent, and deliberate. Clara turned, heart pounding, and there he stood, the Vampire King. His eyes, dark and gleaming, seemed to look through her, seeing both her courage and her fear. "You are unusual," he said softly, almost a whisper. "No one dares stay. No one dares smile at them without fear." Clara met his gaze. "I'm not afraid," she said simply. She did not lie. Fear had no place in her heart, not when children depended on her. He studied her a moment longer, then nodded, as if accepting a truth he had never known could exist in his castle. "Very well," he said. "We shall see if that lasts." The triplets stirred in their beds, whispering and giggling, unaware of the king's silent approval or curiosity. They had not yet fully tested her, but soon they would, and she would need to be ready. Midnight came, and the castle was quiet, too quiet. Clara thought of the stories she had heard, stories of shadows that moved on their own, whispers of curses that plagued the family, of children who vanished into the night. Her heart beat faster, but she did not let fear control her. Then a sound echoed through the hall, a soft, almost musical rustling. Clara froze. She could hear the triplets giggling somewhere in the dark, but then it stopped. Silence returned, heavy and oppressive. She moved cautiously down the hall, her hand brushing against the stone wall. In the grand hall she saw them. The triplets stood together, eyes wide, staring at a dark corner where shadows seemed to writhe. A chill ran down her spine. She knew instinctively that whatever was there, it was not entirely of this world. "Stay behind me," she whispered to the children. They obeyed, small hands clutching hers. A shadow moved. It was fleeting, yet undeniable. Clara's pulse raced. But instead of screaming or fleeing, she did the one thing she had done all her life. She faced it. With courage, calm, and heart open to the unknown, she stepped forward. The shadow recoiled as if surprised by her bravery. It retreated, dissolving into the walls. The triplets gasped. Clara held them close, whispering, "It's okay, you're safe. Nothing will harm you while I'm here." Somewhere behind a darkened archway the king watched. His eyes glimmered with interest, admiration, and a hint of something he did not wish to name. He had ruled centuries, controlled kingdoms, and faced enemies no mortal could imagine. Yet this woman, this ordinary, stubborn, fearless human, had faced the impossible and stood tall. By the first light of dawn, the castle seemed a little less terrifying, a little more alive. The triplets slept, exhausted from their mischief, while Clara sat by the window, watching mist swirl around the towers. She felt the weight of the castle's history, the power of the king, and the secret that the children carried in their wild hearts. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. She did not know what dangers lurked in the shadows or what curses waited to test her resolve. But she knew one thing with certainty: she would not leave. She would face whatever came, not just for herself, but for the 3 children who had already captured her heart, and for the mysterious, haunted man who ruled this castle with darkness and fire. And somewhere in the deepest tower, the Vampire King leaned against cold stone, watching the human who dared enter his world. For the first time in centuries, he wondered, not with suspicion but with an unfamiliar warmth, whether perhaps, just perhaps, she might be the one to tame his wild children, and maybe even his own lonely heart. But the castle was never simple, and the night had not yet finished testing them. Cliffhanger. In the silence of the early morning, a sudden crash echoed from the library. Clara grabbed a candle and ran, only to find the triplets had vanished again, leaving behind a single note written in a language she could not read, and the faintest trace of shadow moving across the walls, watching her every step. The castle had never been quieter. Dawn's pale light stretched over the cold stone walls, yet inside, tension hummed like a living thing. Clara stood in the library, clutching the strange note the triplets had left behind the night before. The letters were sharp and jagged, written in a language that felt older than the castle itself. She frowned, turning the paper over, wishing for any clue. Where could they have gone? She whispered to herself. Her voice echoed off the walls, mingling with the soft sighs of the morning wind. From somewhere above, she heard faint giggles. The triplets were never far. She followed the sound through winding corridors, candlelight flickering against walls lined with portraits of long-dead kings and queens. Their eyes seemed to follow her, as if the castle itself was testing her courage. Finally, she reached the grand hall. There the children stood in the center, eyes wide, circling a glowing pool of water that had appeared overnight in the marble floor. The liquid shimmered with an unnatural light, and the air around it vibrated faintly. Clara's breath caught. "What is this?" she asked, stepping closer. The eldest, a boy with mischievous curls, tilted his head. "It's magic," he said simply. "Mama told us never to touch it, but we wanted to see." "You shouldn't play with things you don't understand," Clara said, keeping her voice gentle but firm. "Come with me. Breakfast first. Then we'll figure this out together." The triplets hesitated, but hunger won over curiosity. They followed her to the dining hall, where the table was set with warm pancakes, golden eggs, and sweet honey. As she served them, she felt the subtle shift in their energy. For the first time, they were calm, focused, and even cooperative. The eldest leaned forward, his eyes curious. You don't seem scared of us," he said. Clara smiled softly. "I have faced harder things than 3 children in a castle," she said, and the children giggled. From the doorway, a shadow moved. The vampire king appeared, his black coat brushing against the floor. He leaned against the frame, watching silently. His gaze lingered on Clara, a strange mix of curiosity and admiration in his dark eyes. "You are bold," he said. "Not many humans would survive one night in this castle, let alone a second." Clara met his gaze evenly. "I'm not here to survive," she replied. "I'm here to help." The king's eyes narrowed slightly. His children were his treasure and his curse, and the idea that a human could influence them, it both intrigued and unsettled him. For centuries, no one had ever dared to step close enough to challenge his control. Clara had done more than that. She had tamed their attention without force. As the days passed, she learned the rhythm of the triplets. Their mischief was endless, yet beneath the chaos lay intelligence, curiosity, and a longing for connection. Clara began to understand that their wildness was more than behavior. It was a reflection of something ancient, powerful, and bound to the castle itself. One afternoon, while reading a story aloud in the great hall, the youngest triplet tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, why is father so sad sometimes?" Clara paused, glancing toward the darkened balcony where the king watched. She had noticed his moods, the quiet moments where the castle seemed to shrink under the weight of his sorrow. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "adults carry burdens we can't see, but it doesn't mean they don't love you." The king stiffened, as if she had spoken directly into the secret chamber of his heart. He had been a ruler for centuries, feared by many, loved by none, and yet here was a human woman speaking truths he had buried long ago. That night, Clara discovered the first true test of her courage. A shadow crept through the halls, a living darkness that pulsed and hissed as if aware of her presence. The triplets had been playing in the library, but now they were silent, staring at the walls as the shadows writhed closer. Clara's heart raced, yet she refused to let fear take hold. "Stay behind me," she whispered. The children obeyed, tiny hands clutching hers. She stepped into the darkness, each footfall echoing across the stone floor. The shadows recoiled as if surprised by her bravery. They hissed and twisted, trying to push her back, but she moved forward, calm and unwavering. The triplets watched in awe, their fear slowly replaced by trust. For the first time, they saw someone protect them, not by strength alone, but by courage and calm. When the shadows finally dissolved, the king emerged silently from the balcony above. His eyes glimmered in the candlelight. "You have no fear," he said quietly, almost to himself. "That is unusual." Clara looked up. "I have fear," she said, "but I do not let it control me. Not for them, not for anyone." The king's lips curved slightly, not a smile, but something closer to it. For centuries he had ruled alone, trusted no one, feared attachment, and yet now he found himself admiring this human, this woman who dared to stand against forces he himself had long avoided. The next morning brought a fragile peace. Clara prepared breakfast, and the triplets gathered around her, laughing and sharing small stories. It was the first time the castle felt like a home rather than a fortress. But peace in the castle was always temporary. A sudden scream shattered the calm. Clara and the triplets rushed to the source, a corridor lined with ancestral paintings. There, a creature of shadow had emerged from the walls, eyes glowing with menace. It lunged at the triplets, and Clara acted instinctively. She placed herself between them and the creature, holding out her arms as if shielding them with sheer will. The creature paused, its form flickering as if testing her resolve. Clara's heart hammered, yet she stood firm. "You will not harm them," she said, her voice strong. "I will not allow it." The creature recoiled, hissing one last time, and vanished into the walls. The triplets stared at her, awe shining in their eyes. The eldest whispered, "Mama, you're like magic." Clara laughed softly, brushing hair from their foreheads. "No," she said. "Just love." The king appeared then, stepping into the corridor, silent and imposing. He studied Clara with an intensity that made her heart skip. "Love," he repeated, almost tasting the word. "I have not heard that in this castle for centuries." For the first time he felt the weight of his own isolation, the loneliness he had carried for ages. These children, wild and untamed, were the reflection of his own fears, mistakes, and lost hopes. And yet this woman, she had entered his world, faced its dangers, and had not fled. She had not judged him. She had not feared him. The days continued, each one a delicate balance of mischief, lessons, and growing trust. Clara discovered hidden staircases, secret gardens, and rooms filled with strange artifacts that hummed with energy. She began to piece together fragments of the castle's history and the family curse that seemed to bind the children's behavior. It became clear that the triplets' wildness was not merely a matter of temperament. A curse lingered in the castle, old as the stones themselves, punishing love, laughter, and warmth. Anyone who tried to care for the children would be tested, rejected, or sent away. And yet Clara, she endured. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, the eldest triplet tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, can father be happy?" Clara looked toward the balcony where the king stood, a dark silhouette against the dying light. "I think he could," she said softly, "if he allows it, if he trusts someone enough to open his heart." The triplet nodded, then whispered, "Then maybe we can help him." The king watched silently, his chest tight with emotions he could not name. The castle had walls of stone, centuries of history, and shadows that whispered secrets. Yet one human woman had begun to crack the fortress around his heart. And that night, the castle tested them once more. A storm of supernatural wind and flickering lights tore through the halls. Candles blew out, doors slammed, and shadows surged like living waves. The triplets clung to Clara, and she held them tightly, whispering reassurance even as fear licked at her heart. From the darkness, a voice echoed, cold, ancient, and full of authority. The curse was waking. It sensed the bond forming between mother and children, between human and king, and it would not relinquish its power easily. Clara squared her shoulders, determination burning in her chest. "We will not be afraid," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The triplets repeated the words, their tiny voices mingling with hers, and for a brief moment the storm seemed to hesitate. The king emerged from the shadows, his presence commanding yet strangely comforting. "You are brave," he said. "Braver than anyone I have ever known. Perhaps you are the one who can change everything." And as lightning illuminated the castle's towers, Clara realized that her life had shifted in ways she could never have imagined. She had entered a world of darkness and mystery, of power and curses, yet she had brought something no one had expected: light. And perhaps, just perhaps, she could be the key to breaking centuries of solitude. Cliffhanger. Just as the storm outside the castle reached its peak, the triplets suddenly cried out. A shadow detached itself from the wall, larger and darker than any they had seen before. It advanced toward them, and Clara realized with a chill that this was no ordinary curse. It was alive, and it had come for her. The castle trembled as if it were alive. The shadows, now thick and restless, twisted around the grand hall like serpents. Clara clutched the triplets' hands, their tiny fingers trembling against hers. She had faced strange and frightening things before, but tonight the darkness seemed to think, to watch, and to test their courage. "Stay close to me," Clara whispered. The triplets nodded, their eyes wide with both fear and trust. Even in this castle of centuries-old magic, they believed she could protect them. From the balcony above, the king appeared. His eyes glimmered with an intensity that made Clara's heart pound. He had been silent for hours, letting the storm rage, letting the castle's magic test her resolve. Now he stepped forward, his presence both commanding and unnervingly calm. "You have done well," he said quietly, "but courage alone may not be enough." Clara straightened her shoulders. "I have to try, they are counting on me." The triplets huddled behind her, whispering softly. "Mama, what is it?" the youngest asked, his voice barely audible. "It's the castle," Clara replied, her voice steady. "It wants to see if we are strong enough to stay together. If we are, it will allow us to be happy." The eldest triplet's eyes sparkled. "Then we'll show it," he said bravely. Clara smiled, feeling warmth in her chest despite the darkness surrounding them. Courage, she realized, was not the absence of fear. It was the choice to move forward in spite of it. From the shadows, a figure emerged, tall, indistinct, moving with a fluid, unnatural grace. Its eyes glowed red, reflecting the flickering candlelight. This was no ordinary shadow. It was the curse made manifest, a creature born from centuries of loneliness, regret, and the king's own hidden sorrow. Clara stepped forward, placing herself between the creature and the triplets. "You will not harm them," she said, her voice strong and unwavering. The creature hissed, a sound like the wind through dead trees. It lunged at her, dark tendrils reaching out. Clara did not flinch. She remembered the mornings with the triplets, the laughter over breakfast, the simple joy of pancakes and honey. She held that memory tightly, letting it give her strength. "Leave them," she said firmly. "I will not allow you to hurt them." The shadows recoiled, twisting violently, and then dissipated, like smoke in a sudden gust of wind. The triplets cheered softly, their laughter mingling with Clara's sigh of relief. The king's eyes softened as he stepped closer. "You have done what no one else could," he said quietly. "You have faced the darkness and remained unbroken." Clara looked at him, feeling a strange pull in her chest. "I only did what I had to do," she said, "for them, and for you in a way. I can't leave them alone here, not in this place." He studied her, his expression unreadable. The castle had many secrets, but Clara's bravery, her warmth, and her unwavering presence were new to him. For centuries, no one had touched the walls around his heart. Now she had begun to chip them away, carefully, subtly, without even realizing it. Days passed, and the castle's magic seemed to shift. Rooms that had once been cold and dark glimmered faintly with a welcoming light. The triplets began to trust Clara fully, sharing their secrets, fears, and dreams. They called her Mama with a sincerity that melted even the king's stern heart. But the curse remained, subtle and patient. Shadows would still move where no one should be, whispers would echo in empty corridors, and doors would sometimes slam shut on their own. Clara realized that the castle's magic was tied to the king himself, his guilt, his solitude, and his fear of losing those he cared for. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, Clara followed the triplets into a hidden chamber. The walls were lined with ancient tomes, their spines etched with symbols older than memory. The air was thick with magic, and the triplets stared in awe. "Is this where the curse comes from?" the eldest asked. Clara ran her fingers over a dusty book. "I think so," she said softly. "Something in this castle or in the king's family made the children wild. It punished anyone who tried to care for them." The youngest triplet frowned. "But we love Mama," Clara smiled gently, "and the curse doesn't like that. It tests love because it has been starved for so long." The middle triplet's eyes widened. "Then maybe we can help it and Father too." Clara's heart swelled. "We'll try," she said. "Together." Meanwhile, the king observed them from the doorway. His chest tightened as he watched Clara guide his children through the library, teaching them to read the old texts and showing them patience and care. He had never seen anyone so fearless, not in centuries. And yet, every smile she earned from the children, every laugh she shared with them, chipped away at his carefully constructed walls. That night, the castle tested them again. A strange, ethereal fog rolled through the halls, glowing faintly with a ghostly light. The triplets clung to Clara as shadows moved in the corners, twisting into strange, almost human shapes. The air buzzed with magic, heavy and almost alive. Clara took a deep breath. "We are not afraid," she said. "Together we can face anything." The shadows hesitated, sensing the bond between Clara and the children. They twisted violently, then withdrew into the walls, leaving only faint trails of light that shimmered and faded. The king stepped forward from the balcony, his expression serious. "You have done more than survive," he said. "You have begun to heal something that has been broken for centuries." Clara looked up at him. "You mean the children?" He shook his head slowly. "No, me." The triplets gasped. Clara's eyes widened. "You are hurting?" she asked softly. The king looked down at the floor, voice low. "I have carried the weight of centuries of mistakes I cannot undo. I have isolated myself, feared attachment, and yet here you are. And I feel something I thought was impossible." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest. "It's never too late," she said gently. "For you, for them, for all of us." The king's eyes glimmered with a mixture of longing and fear. He had ruled kingdoms, faced enemies, and seen centuries pass, yet never had he felt so vulnerable. Clara's presence, her courage, and her love for his children had awakened emotions he had long buried. Days turned into weeks. Clara and the triplets explored secret gardens, hidden staircases, and rooms filled with strange artifacts that hummed with power. Each discovery revealed more about the castle's history, its magic, and the curse that had haunted the family for generations. The triplets grew more confident and joyful, their wildness tempered by Clara's patience and care. They laughed, played, and even began to guide her through the castle's mysteries. Clara realized that love and trust were slowly transforming not only the children but the castle itself. But the curse was patient. One night, while Clara and the triplets slept, a shadow moved through the hallways, larger and darker than any before. It whispered ancient words that chilled the air and pulsed with power. The triplets stirred, sensing danger even in sleep. Clara awoke, her heart pounding. The shadow lunged at them, and Clara sprang into action. She placed herself between the children and the darkness, holding her arms out as if her courage alone could shield them. "You will not harm them," she said firmly. The shadow hesitated, then dissolved into the walls. The triplets clutched her tightly, whispering, "Mama, you're magic." Clara laughed softly. "No," she said, "just love." The king appeared then, his presence calm but commanding. "You face the impossible and remain unbroken," he said. "Perhaps you are the one who can change everything. Perhaps you are the key to breaking centuries of darkness." Clara looked at him, understanding the weight of his words. She had come to the castle to survive, to care for the triplets, and now she realized she had become a force of hope in a place that had known only fear and sorrow. Cliffhanger. As the first light of dawn touched the castle towers, a whisper carried through the halls, soft, ancient, and full of warning. The curse will not yield so easily, the heart of darkness awaits. The triplets clutched Clara's hands, and she knew that the true test of courage, trust, and love was yet to come. The castle had never seen a night like this. Shadows stretched across the walls, moving as if alive, while the wind howled through the towers like a creature in pain. Clara stood in the grand hall, the triplets clinging to her sides, their eyes wide with fear. But fear alone would not rule them tonight. Together they were a force stronger than any curse. The heart of the darkness is here, Clara whispered to herself, tightening her grip on the triplets' small hands, and we will face it together. Above them, the vampire king watched silently from the balcony. For the first time, he did not command or judge. He did not hesitate or calculate. He simply observed, feeling a strange stirring in his chest. The centuries of solitude, of walls built from fear and regret, trembled at the presence of the woman who had dared to challenge him and his cursed children. The shadows in the hall thickened, forming a dark vortex that seemed to pulse with life. The air grew cold, and whispers, ancient and unintelligible, echoed off the walls. This was the final test. The curse had awakened fully, sensing that its hold on the family was in jeopardy. Clara stepped forward, placing herself between the darkness and the triplets. "You will not harm them," she said, her voice strong, unwavering. "I will not allow it." The shadows surged, striking at her, twisting and writhing like living tendrils. The triplets huddled close, their small hands gripping hers tightly. Clara closed her eyes and drew on everything she had learned in the castle: courage, patience, love, and trust. She let these feelings fill her heart, and she spoke aloud, a clear, steady voice cutting through the chaos. "Love is stronger than fear. Love is stronger than darkness. You cannot touch what is bound by love." For a moment the shadows paused, as if stunned by the words. The triplets repeated her phrase, their voices trembling but clear. "Love is stronger than fear. Love is stronger than darkness." The darkness hesitated, pulsing violently, then began to weaken. Slowly, it dissolved into wisps of black smoke that drifted upward and vanished through the ceiling. Light returned to the hall, soft and golden, filtering through the high windows. Clara opened her eyes, and the triplets stared up at her in awe. "You did it," the eldest whispered. "You defeated it." Clara smiled gently, brushing hair from their foreheads. "We did it," she said. "Together." From the balcony, the king descended. His eyes, once dark and unreadable, now glimmered with something warm and human. He knelt before the triplets, who had always been wild and untamed, and they approached him cautiously at first. But then, with trust in their eyes, they embraced him. Clara watched, her heart full, as the king's shoulders relaxed for the first time in centuries. A soft, almost fragile smile touched his lips. The curse had been broken, not by magic alone, but by courage, love, and unwavering faith. "Clara," the king said, his voice low and full of emotion, you changed everything, not just the children, but me." Clara met his gaze, feeling the weight of his words. "It wasn't just me," she said softly. "It was all of us. And love, it always finds a way, even in the darkest places." The triplets giggled, bouncing around them in joy. Their wildness had transformed, not erased, into playful energy and curiosity, free of the curse that had haunted their family for generations. They ran through the hall, exploring the castle with laughter and lightness, while Clara and the king watched, feeling hope and renewal fill the ancient stone walls. As days passed, the castle itself seemed to breathe. Rooms that had been cold and dark now glimmered with a soft warmth. Gardens bloomed under magical sunlight that had not touched the castle for centuries. The triplets thrived under Clara's care. their personalities blossoming into joy, mischief, and wonder, but now tempered by the love and safety she had created. The king began to open himself more, sharing the story of the curse and the guilt he had carried for centuries. He spoke of mistakes, of isolation, of centuries spent ruling a kingdom without joy, and of the fear of attachment that had kept him from happiness. Clara listened, her heart softening with each word. "You were never alone," she said gently. "Not completely. You had the triplets, and now you have me, and together we can be stronger than any darkness." He studied her, his eyes full of admiration and gratitude. "I never imagined someone like you could enter this castle and survive, thrive even. You have given me something I thought was lost forever." Clara stepped closer, her hand brushing against his. "Then don't let it go," she said softly. "Not ever." The king felt something stir in his chest, a warmth he had not felt in centuries. He took her hand in his, hesitating for the briefest moment before closing the space between them. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried centuries of unspoken emotions: trust, gratitude, longing, and the beginnings of love. Together they watched the triplets explore the castle, free of the curse's influence. The children laughed and shouted, their voices echoing through the halls like music. They had finally found safety, joy, and family, things the castle had denied them for generations. That evening the family gathered in the great hall. A feast was laid before them, simple but warm, and the triplets chattered endlessly, telling stories of their adventures and discoveries. The king, once stoic and cold, joined in, sharing laughter that had been locked away for centuries. Clara looked around the room, feeling a sense of peace she had never known. The castle, once a place of fear and isolation, was now alive with light, laughter, and love. The shadows had been defeated, the curse broken, and hearts transformed. Later, as the triplets slept, Clara and the king stood on the balcony, looking out over the forest bathed in moonlight. The wind was calm, and the castle seemed to breathe softly around them. "You changed everything," the king said again, his voice full of awe. "The children, the castle, and me." Clara leaned against him gently. "We changed everything together," she said, "and we'll keep changing it every day with love and courage." He looked down at her, his expression softening. "I never thought I could feel this alive, this free, and it's because of you." Clara smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "And it's because of you too," she said. "You let me in. You trusted me, and you let the children trust me. That's how curses are broken, not by magic alone, but by hearts willing to fight for each other." For the first time in centuries, the king felt a sense of hope, of renewal, and of belonging. The castle, once a prison of shadows, had become a home filled with light and laughter. The triplets had found a mother. He had found someone he could trust and care for. And together, they had defeated the darkness that had ruled their lives. The castle's towers glowed softly under the moonlight as the new family stood together. Clara and the king, hand in hand, felt the weight of centuries lift from their shoulders. The triplets' laughter echoed through the halls, pure and joyous, a sound that would now always belong to them. And though the castle still held secrets and ancient magic, it no longer held fear. It was a place of hope, courage, and love, a place where darkness had been met with bravery, and where hearts had found each other in the most unlikely of places. Cliffhanger optional for sequels. As Clara and the king gazed out at the horizon, a faint shimmer appeared in the farthest tower, a soft, golden light that pulsed with an unknown energy. The triplets stirred in their sleep, sensing it. Clara tightened her hand around the king's. "Whatever comes next," she whispered, "we face it together." The king nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Together," he said, and in the castle that had once been a prison of shadows, a new dawn rose, one of laughter, courage, and love that could never be broken.